One day, the boy suddenly heard strange noises coming from inside the earthen wall. He dug into the soil where the sound was coming from and discovered an ancient, mysterious wooden box. Curious, Alan pulled out the box and quickly opened it, only to find an old chessboard inside. With no one around, he hurriedly carried the chessboard home. Once there, he opened it and began examining it closely. The exquisite chessboard fascinated Alan, but just as he took out the pieces to start playing, his mother's call startled him. An eerie, unstoppable game had quietly begun. That night, his father handed him an envelope, intending to send Alan to the private school where their family had been educated for generations. But Alan didn't want to go because he was often bullied by classmates due to his surname. Seeing his son, the father felt a deep sense of disappointment. Alan immediately tore up the acceptance letter and began packing his things, preparing to leave the oppressive and hopeless home. As he was about to leave, he didn't forget the mysterious chessboard under his bed. However, when he opened the door, he found his crush already standing outside. Sarah felt that he was being bullied because of her and came specifically to apologize. But Alan, without looking back, continued out the door.
What was that?
L'hai sentito anche tu?
He told her about the chessboard and suggested they explore its secrets together. Sarah thought it was a waste of time and casually tossed the dice before turning to leave. Unexpectedly, the chess pieces started moving on their own, drawing Sarah's attention back. Alan believed that the pieces' movement must have been caused by a magnetic mechanism in the board. Soon, a line of text appeared in the center of the board, hidden by day, emerging by night. "Run for your life." A strange sound from the fireplace startled them, and a terrified Sarah suggested ending the game. Just as Alan was about to pack up the board, the dice slipped from his hand again, forcing them to continue playing. This time, the message on the board read, "Lost in the forest, unable to return home until a 5 or 8 is rolled." Before they could react, Alan's body was sucked into the board like noodles. Disappearing without a trace. At the same time, hundreds of bats flew out of the fireplace. Terrified, Sarah fled from the house and never returned. It wasn't until 26 years later that the house finally welcomed new residents, a woman and her 2 nephews, who came to stay for a vacation. The curious boy explored every corner of the house, only to find that the bats from years ago still lived there. Frightened, he ran off in a panic. His aunt had no choice but to call someone to inspect the house, but they found nothing unusual. However, the workers told them about the house's legend. The previous owner's son mysteriously disappeared overnight, and everyone suspected that the father had killed him before moving out of the house. As soon as the workers left, the siblings heard strange noises from upstairs. They immediately followed the sound, leading them to a storage room. After a thorough search, they found the old chessboard in a corner. Excited, the siblings brought it to the center of the room to play. Strangely, the 2 pieces on the board wouldn't move. Peter pulled out 2 pieces, and, amazingly, they automatically rolled to the starting position on the board. Judy took the dice from Peter and rolled them. The pieces moved on their own, and a line of text appeared. "A gentle sting will make you tremble all over." Suddenly, giant mosquitoes swooped towards them. Judy quickly grabbed a nearby tennis racket and swatted at one, while the other 2 flew out the window. As Judy looked back at her brother, she saw the dice being thrown again. "The task is tough. A horde of mischievous monkeys will hinder you." They heard a commotion downstairs and rushed to the kitchen, finding it in chaos caused by a group of monkeys. Judy finally realized that different things appeared based on the dice roll. As they returned to the room, she noticed another line of text on the board. "Once the game starts, it cannot be stopped." Seeing this, Peter wanted to throw away the board to end the game, but Judy reminded him that to stop the game, someone had to reach the end. Determined to finish the game quickly, Peter rolled the dice again. A fearsome cat with mighty jaws loves human flesh. Dodge quickly or face regret. A terrifying lion suddenly appeared, scaring the siblings. They quickly ran downstairs. In an instant, the lion blocked their path. Suddenly, a wild man appeared behind them. Using his agility, he dodged the lion's attacks and locked the door, trapping the lion inside. The siblings narrowly escaped the danger. The wild man standing before them was none other than Alan, who had disappeared 26 years ago.
Qualcuno ha fatto un 5 o un 8.
Sì, lui.
It was because Peter rolled a 5 that Alan was finally released from the chessboard. Excited, Alan's first thought was to see his parents, whom he hadn't seen in 26 years. However, after searching around, he couldn't find any trace of them. Judy then told him that the house had been vacant for many years and that they had only moved in a few days ago. A sense of foreboding washed over Alan, prompting him to rush to his father's old factory, only to find it abandoned and in ruins. As he stood there, crestfallen, he noticed a figure upstairs and thought it might be his father. However, upon opening the door, he found it was just a homeless man living there. The homeless man explained that the factory's owner had shut it down after losing his son and that both parents had eventually died of heartbreak. Alan realized that the only way to see his parents now was through their cold gravestones. Seeing Alan's sorrow, the siblings empathized, sharing that they, too, had lost their parents, but there was no time for grief. The most important task was to finish the mysterious game, as the entire city had fallen into chaos. Ending the game was the only solution. However, Peter was traumatized by the game and refused to continue, locking himself in the bathroom and shaving off all the long hair that had grown on his body. He put on his father's old clothes. Peter then insulted Alan, calling him a coward for wanting to run away. These words deeply hurt Alan, who retorted that they couldn't possibly understand the horrors of the game and insisted he was the only one who could lead them to victory.
So, you're gonna help us?
Reluctantly, he agreed to continue the game, but when Judy rolled the dice, the pieces didn't move. Alan then realized that the game from 26 years ago had never ended, and the next person to roll the dice should be Sarah. The three of them rushed to Sarah's house, where they were greeted by a middle-aged woman. Alan immediately told his intention.
26 years ago, you played a game with a little boy down the street?
How do you know that? I was that little boy, Sarah.
There is no way out of the three can only carry Sarah back home. As soon as Alan brought out the chessboard, Sarah's expression changed. She remembered how no one had believed her back then, even accusing her of having delusions. Over time, she began to think she was actually insane and had been taking psychiatric medication for 26 years. Despite now knowing the truth, Sarah still didn't want to continue the game. Seeing her firm refusal, Alan couldn't force her. Now Sarah was completely dumbfounded and had to carry on with the game next. Another line of text appeared in the center of the board. It grows fast and furious. Don't let it catch you. Suddenly, massive vines burst from all sides of the house. Alan, experienced in jungle survival, tried to guide them safely. However, he overlooked the danger below, and Peter's legs were entangled by the vines. However, Alan's tug actually pulled the cannibal flower right out of the cabinet. Seeing Peter about to be devoured, Alan had no choice but to break a family heirloom antique knife and cut the thick roots, saving him just in time. Fearing for her safety, Sarah tried to escape, but Judy reminded her that finishing the game was the only way to end it. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed to stay. When Alan threw the dice, his expression changed dramatically. A hunter, who had been chasing him in the game for 26 years, appeared in the house. The hunter continued to pursue Alan, even into the street, until a passing sheriff saw the commotion. The sheriff, alarmed by the hunter's brazen behavior, took cover behind his patrol car and ordered him to surrender. The hunter, unfazed, kept firing until he ran out of bullets. To continue his pursuit, the hunter went to a weapon shop, only to find that the ammunition he needed had been discontinued over 100 years ago. The hunter immediately pulled out a bunch of gold coins, and the boss immediately took out one of the latest heavy machine guns. Meanwhile, Alan managed to shake off the hunter and returned home, desperate to end the dreadful game. Just as Judy rolled the dice, the entire house began to shake violently, causing books to fall from the shelves. Realizing the danger, Alan urged everyone to flee. A herd of rhinos suddenly burst through the bookcases, charging toward them. They barely escaped by leaping into a hallway. Unexpectedly, a pelican appeared, snatched the chessboard, and flew out of the house. To retrieve the board, they chased the pelican, unaware that even greater dangers awaited them. Alan found the pelican by a small stream. While trying to distract it, the board fell into the water. Thankfully, Peter's agility saved the day, and he retrieved the board. On their way back, they encountered the sheriff, who recognized Alan and tried to arrest him. At that moment, the hunter aimed his gun at Alan. Realizing the danger, Alan gave up resisting and dived into the police car. They could only watch as the sheriff took him away. Meanwhile, Peter, desperate to finish the game quickly, tried to manipulate the board. However, his hands began growing thick hair, Upon returning to the city, they discovered the chaos the board had caused. The animals from the game had reached the city, and Peter hid in a car with the board. The car was crushed by the rampaging animals, but Peter miraculously survived. The hunter then snatched the board from Peter. Following the hunter, they arrived at a supermarket. Meanwhile, Alan, trying to escape the sheriff, tricked him into removing his handcuffs by asking to use the restroom. Unexpectedly, Alan turned around, locked the sheriff in, and even threw the key into the field. Just as he was about to leave, he accidentally heard on the car radio that a woman and 2 children had been kidnapped at the supermarket. He quickly returned to the car, took the wheel, and sped towards the supermarket. However, upon arrival, Alan didn't stop the car but drove straight into the supermarket. He crashed into the shelves near the hunter, causing a whole row of paint cans to topple over him. After successfully retrieving the game board, the group was shocked by the sight at home. The entire house was tightly wrapped in a tangle of vines, but now was not the time to marvel. They immediately opened the board to finish the unfinished game. As Sarah rolled the dice, the ceiling was instantly covered with dark clouds, and a storm followed in the next second. To their shock, the water inside the house rose rapidly, flooding the entire room in the blink of an eye. Even more terrifying, a giant crocodile suddenly emerged from the water. In a panic, Alan placed the siblings on the chandelier and jumped into the water to fight the crocodile. At that moment, the aunt and the sheriff arrived, but they found the door wouldn't open no matter what. In desperation, the sheriff directly kicked the door to the room. A moment of water in the room immediately poured out, thanks to the sheriffs to save the precarious 4 people, but the sheriff and his aunt were not so lucky, and were swept straight down the main road together with the crocodile. The 4 then returned to the attic to continue the unfinished game. Just as Alan rolled the dice, the floor beneath him transformed as if it were quicksand, engulfing his body until only half of him remained above. In a hurry, Judy grabbed a wooden stick to try to pull Alan out, but it didn't work. Seeing Alan about to be swallowed, Sarah grabbed him with her bare hands while Judy quickly rolled the dice again. Miraculously, Alan stopped sinking, but unfortunately, Sarah's hands were completely bound by the floor, and a swarm of giant spiders was closing in on them. Alan sees this and rushes Judy to bring in the board and asks Sarah to throw the dice with her mouth. As the dice landed, all the spiders quickly scattered, running out of the house. The next moment, a violent tremor occurred. The floor cracked open, and the entire house split apart. The game board fell into the deep crevice. In order to get the board, Alan simply let go of his hand and borrowed from his jungle experience to get the board back again. As he opened the game board and prepared to roll the dice that would decide his fate, the relentless hunter appeared before him once again. Seeing something in Alan's hand, the hunter immediately ordered him to drop it, not realizing that this was exactly what Alan wanted. The first die is a point, the second one is no more or less than 2 points. The total of the 2 dice perfectly matched the remaining spaces on the board. As Alan rolled the final die, the hunter pulled the trigger. To everyone's surprise, Sarah leaped in front of Alan, and the bullet stopped in midair, gradually dissipating. At the same time, the hunter's body began to transform, and all the creatures from the game board were absorbed back into it. In that moment when the game ended, Alan and Sarah found themselves back on that night 26 years ago, as if nothing had ever happened, and that's when his father shows up, creating an unspeakable emotion in Alan, with so much inside that he wants to say to him but can't. He offered his father a heartfelt apology, and his father expressed regret for his own actions. The barrier between them was not unbreakable. Sometimes, a simple look could resolve everything. Fast forward 26 years, Alan and Sarah were now married as promised. Alan took over his father's factory and found strong partners to work with. The couple's children were the same brother and sister from that time. Thanks to their parents' collaboration, the siblings' fate was changed, preventing them from losing their parents. And that ancient chessboard was thrown into the creek by Alan that night. But that doesn't mean that's the end of Jumanji either.